Sean Diddy Combs files another request to get out of jail. His attorney citing new evidence they claim will reveal the prosecution's case
Lawyers are
against
making
him.
a bombshell allegation. They say this video of him beating ex-girlfriend Cassie was leaked by the Department of
He believes he's
Homeland
innocent.
Security
I
for the
believe he's
purpose-
innocent.
I know y'all take it like, well, that was hardcore. That's cruel. That is the game you in. I am sorry. That is the game you decided to get in.
Sean Combs is already fighting multiple sex assault allegations, each one more disturbing than the
I
next.
like nobody. You have to know.
His latest accuser says he was 10 years old
I
at the
don't
time.
like just to win. I want to win over and over and over. I want to be at the end of the day. I want all
Sean
of us
Diddy
to be
Combs
the best.
investigation. New surveillance video shows Combs being taken into custody in a Manhattan hotel last week.
Next, give me something else.
He took me out of a dangerous game. I mean, I was selling drugs real hard. When I got the record deal, all I got cut short. So it's like he Jesus to me, you know what I'm saying? Because he just saved me.
Can't you do it? I can do it. I can do anything.
You know, the game has been elevated. As we can tell, there's no expense being spared. We are the black billionaires lunch. Yeah, you understand? Right. And we here together, and we're gonna keep staying together. We getting tighter. You know what I'm saying? And united we stand. And ain't nothing else to us, right? That's right here.
If you are here for the detailed breakdown of all the salacious, horrifying crimes of one Sean Puffy Combs, I just want to warn you up front, this video will disappoint you. I don't say that as a way to undermine the crimes and accusations toward the man. I think the things he's been accused of are very serious, and I think he did pretty much all of that shit. Allegedly. Right? The things he's accused of are so serious, in fact, that I think it's actually more important for me to spend my time and energy to address them in a more in-depth and nuanced way. One thing that always happens with these types of stories, these types of events, is that everyone gets really riled up to rightfully pillory a bad guy. And going back through the history of human civilization, be it public canings or guillotines or entire towns watching alleged witches being burned at the stake, or white Southerners taking pictures of a public lynching of an accused black person, there's a kind of gross cathartic engagement that people have always had with watching someone go down. But unlike many of those situations throughout history, it's not often where everyone, no matter their ideology or background, that they can come together, sit back and say, yeah, this motherfucker had it coming. And I want to be clear, Diddy most definitely does have it coming, but I find myself needing to do more than make a video explaining that. What I think is more important is discussing how Diddy got to the status he was in the first place, and how that status protected him from pretty much well-known crimes he was committing behind the scenes to a lot of people, both physically, sexually, and financially. Sean Diddy Combs, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, he has a lot of names. I'll be using a lot of them interchangeably, is the most recent in what is sadly a growing tradition of famous, powerful black male entertainers from my era being exposed as predators and abusers as he faces federal sex trafficking charges. And this is coming off the heels of numerous women suing him over sexual misconduct and abuse allegations of various forms, with the most notable being his ex-girlfriend Cassie, to whom he paid out a $10 million settlement last year, requiring her to at least agree not to speak on her experiences with him. This did not stop a tape of him brutally attacking her in a hotel hallway from being released to the public, which had the effect of finally, after literal decades of people saying he was a bad guy, being seen as a bad guy in hip-hop culture permanently, facing the same fate as Bill Cosby and R. Kelly before him after their crimes were exposed. By the way, here's all the trigger warnings, because this goes dark at times, and I'm not going to show him abusing anyone, but if you're sensitive to that, similar to as if I was talking about R. Kelly or Bill Cosby, you might want to check in with me for another video. That said, this is different to me than R. Kelly and Bill Cosby. People knew about Bill Cosby's crimes, but they were still greatly a secret by comparison. Nobody had much bad to say about Bill Cosby, like publicly, although it was something that people were aware of, at least within the industry, and to an extent outside of it. R. Kelly is kind of in between, because his crimes were known. At one point he was on trial for. After he got acquitted, a lot of folks, you know, They gave him space. They still dealt with him a little bit, but he also did lose a bit of his star power. Like before R. Kelly went to jail, his most notable thing in years was that bizarre Tyler Perry inspired Trapped in the Closet series. But Diddy was very different. Diddy was a known ghoul in the industry for years. His abuse of Cassie was an open secret. His abuse of his previous girlfriend, Kim Porter, was an open secret. His sex parties and freak-offs were an open secret, to the point where many a celebrity had either tacitly or openly spoken on occasion about how they didn't mess with Diddy because they knew what Diddy was.
I'm gonna have a party, and we had parties, but I was more like just trying to just vibe, like just see where I look back on where I became.
Did you miss me though? For real, because I'm saying it seems like a thing.
I miss
his
partying
birthday
with
party,
Puff, man.
But I'm talking about for your birthday.
Huh?
Why won't you party with me for your birthday, man?
Yeah, we partied for my birthday before. You came to my party.
No, but man, you ain't never really party. You know what I'm saying?
What are some things that you feel like I should look out for? You know, coming into the game. Like you've been in the game for a long time, man.
Somebody's out for.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Stay away from that. Stay away from the take that mansion. That's all I'm gonna say. All right, stay away from that. All right. Second, they're laughing because they know it's true.
Diddy also had been in violent altercations with numerous other figures within the industry, including assaulting Drake at a party.
Historically, we've heard about you putting hands on people throughout the years. Like, what made you put hands on Drake?
I did not put hands on Drake.
Oh.
And I do not want any problems with Drake. Drake is, right now, that's all I got.
Getting two-piece by J. Cole at another party.
My last rap was with Puff Daddy. Who would have thought it? I bought that nigga album in 7th grade and played it so much, you would have thought my favorite rapper was Puff. Back then I ain't know shit, now I know too much.
At least one known shooting that caused him to break up with J-Lo and one of his rappers to go to jail.
According to police reports, the couple jumped into the backseat of his SUV. Puffy's driver and his bodyguard were in front. Officers arrived as the SUV pulled away. They ordered the driver to stop. Instead, he swerved around a patrol car and led cops on an 11-block chase. Police finally forced the SUV to pull over. Officers discovered a loaded gun on the front seat.
Everybody was booked, including Jennifer Lopez. They spent the night in the precinct.
He was also responsible for the poor fate of numerous other rappers under him. There is a long list of rappers and singers who curse his name openly over unpaid royalties, bad contracts, or just being cheated out of money. His penchant for abuse and cruelty was basically the main character of numerous reality TV shows throughout the mid-2000s and on MTV.
Point, your will go back. Somebody gonna quit. Somebody ain't got the heart, the stamina to be bad boy. Somebody ain't got the passion, the drive, the intensity to want it. Somebody's mental capacity breaks at a certain point. I need to see it now. I want to see it when I'm 2 million in.
But yet he persisted. Not just persisted, Diddy thrived. Diddy gained an unrivaled iconic status in hip-hop, rubbed elbows not just with hip-hop and industry giants, but business giants in general, and connected with the political elite. All of this while being well known that he was a snake, abuser, and a predator. And not in the hushed way of, different predators like maybe a Harvey Weinstein were. No, these were loud public accusations, trials, and multiple other legendary artists constantly sounding the alarm that Diddy was bad. Yet nobody seemed to care till there was video proof. How and why is this possible? If it seems implausible that this would be the case, remember that we've seen this before. We saw this same routine again with Harvey Weinstein in the predominantly white world of Hollywood. We saw it with Cosby, and there are numerous other abusers and predators still moving around Hollywood in our entertainment industry. Even our politicians are doing this with minimal resistance. And this is because we have a culture that believes that those with power, especially men, are simply allowed to do certain things that those with less power cannot. And more than anything, that is what I'm going to talk about. Not just the horrors of Diddy behind the scenes, although it's going to come up a bit, but more to peel back the onion on how and why Diddy was able to exist in the first place, both as a legend and game changer in hip hop, a mogul and executives at the levers of power in the entertainment industry, as well as a monster behind and in front of the scenes the entire time. Diddy is a symptom of a bigger problem within hip-hop and all media, where the misogynistic and patriarchal norms of those spaces make it not just possible but predictable that someone like Diddy can survive and thrive. Because this one isn't just some hip-hop lore, I needed to reach out to some folks closer to the story than I was, because I wanted to dig deeper into the entirety of the era that Diddy was born out of. An era that coincides with some of my own very vivid memories of hip-hop, an era that was greatly shaped by Diddy for better and for worse, and most importantly, an era and culture that everyone was a part of.
This is a true economic business, right? Supply and demand. You take away the demand, there's no supply. Nobody's trying to buy a VCR right now, you know, right. So there's no one selling it. But we've heard oftentimes that prostitution is the oldest profession, which we know is not true. You know, farming is the oldest profession. And a lot of times when you take away those narratives that people have, you really begin to see how people are exploited and what makes people vulnerable. Because trafficking is a really big business, but it's about power and control.
Who he's been, whether it was triggering to one group of people or another group of people, or people are talking about one incident or another incident, his brand has been so separate from however safe he felt that when all these allegations have come out, people aren't questioning whether it's in his ability to do this. Especially when that Cassie tape came out. When that Cassie tape was made visible, after him denying that even happened, like, you know, literally an hour before everybody saw it or whatever, or whenever he was reacting to the lawsuit. As soon as that, like, literally everything is legitimately confirmed in a lot of people's mind. And that lets you know how long he's been living above the law or outside of his own humanity. And to have it implemented, to him to be such a powerful person with all these influences and having so much control over entertainment, and then truthfully the spirits business, truthfully fashion too, truthfully, I mean, he's over here with presidents.
My story, so I was thinking about this as we were setting it up, because it's like, I don't really have nothing, like I didn't see anything, but what I want to talk about is how every fucking body knew. Every fucking body knew. So I got both of them, R. Kelly and Diddy. I go to a Diddy yacht party. I want to go to a Diddy party. So I finally get invited to one. I'm getting to the door. Another nigga I know, he's like, no, she can't come in.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, damn, I can't stop meeting these haters. Now here we are all these years later, and I know why. And I'm like, but all of these men who knew, everybody fucking knew. And if they didn't have nobody to care about you, that's two situations right there. It could have had me completely fucked up.
I think the harm goes way back. I think if we think about how the music industry has historically worked for Black people, I think there has always been an understanding that if you are going to engage the music industry, be prepared for harm.
Right.
You know, I think there has always been a fight, particularly for identifiably Black women, to get their penance properly from the music industry. Right. And because it's the same sort of principle. Let me exploit you because you're going to have opportunity that nobody else has. And so don't see it as me exploiting you. See it as opportunity that nobody else has. Because I'm wealthy. And look at my house. And look at the people that I'm around. And you want access to this. And I will give you access to this if you allow me to financially harm you.
Much as Diddy deserves every takedown, think piece, expose that he has gotten, it's more important to recognize that everyone knew what he was doing. And if we don't engage with that, then we'll just make it okay for the next Diddy to do the same thing. We as a wider culture, not just Black folks, not just hip hop, because this is definitely not an only hip hop thing. I want to make that clear early on, but really the American way. We always seem shocked as insert bad man here does exactly the same thing that bad men have done throughout history. So let's actually analyze that history to figure out why it keeps happening. And to do that, we do have to understand how and why Diddy became such an iconic figure in the first place. And for that, we're just gonna, before we get to the bad stuff, spend a little time analyzing and breaking down some hip hop history.
It all goes back to one point. So I have a dream. A lot of times people see your dreams, they crazy. You going for your passion you have for your dreams may make you act crazy. You're trying to reach your goals for your dreams. You're driven, you know. The dreams you have are so visionary, they may call you a genius. But it's just, I'm a dreamer. I love closing my eyes and dreaming. I don't really deal with reality when I deal with trying to work towards the future.
Diddy was born in 1969 in Harlem, New York, to Janice and Melvin Combs. Sadly, Melvin Combs, Diddy's father, was murdered when Diddy was only 2 years old, leaving him fatherless and forcing him into the stereotypical impoverished environment that is a staple for the rag to riches stories that hip-hop tends to lionize. Although Diddy did eventually move to a much nicer Mount Vernon suburb later in his life, still, we're talking about the 80s when crime and urban decay in New York was at an all-time high. Our modern news media likes to sensationalize urban crime today when actually crime is down in America compared to the 70s and 80s. Thus, Diddy came of age in New York in the thick of the crack epidemic.
Cocaine, more commonly known as crack, because it's cheaper to buy.
Mothers were sitting there talking, and next thing you know, out of the dark, gunshots would start going off.
The war did continue in the streets, and Americans on the front lines had their own battle-hardened reaction to the new threat.
It's not something I've ever heard Diddy speak on, but it's hard to imagine that even in Mount Vernon, he didn't have his fair share of struggle and horrors that were very close to him. All that said, it seemed like he was shielded from the worst of those things. Diddy attended a private Catholic school and managed to attend the prestigious historically black college Howard University in Washington, D.C., where he would make a name for himself as a local party promoter, and this eventually made a path for him to get involved with the exploding hip-hop music industry in the late 80s.
Started basically in college, Howard University, and I started doing internships. And one of my internships was at Uptown MCA Records, and I went from an intern to a permanent position there.
Diddy is entering into a hip-hop world in the late 80s and early 90s, right as it stops being the avant-garde radical music wave and when it becomes a big money industry with lots of corporate attention. And this positions Diddy to be a huge benefactor as he is connected to the raw art form through his entertainment and street connections, but also has the education and language to translate all of that organic hip-hop connection into corporate benefit. He is the perfect gatekeeper, right as that role of gatekeeping is being established, and this immediately imbues him with a lot of power in hip-hop.
I just took people that I thought I could get along with, and people that I'm fans of. I'm fans of all of those people. Like, it bugs me out that I'm headlining a tour, and I'm fans of all of these people that are helping to support me.
Let's take a close look of how Diddy, a man with legit really only one talent, found himself as a vector of significant power between so many talented people. And to do that, really need to just recognize that he just copied the framework that was already there, being done to black artists by white people for generations.
Rap shows, black shows have not sold out in years since Triple Threat. And I'm telling you right now, it's easy. If we just do this couple of things, you're gonna sell records, and at the end of the day, you're gonna be going and playing to packed houses.
The music industry has, for most of its existence, been an industry deeply rooted in all the awful parts of capitalism. I talk about capitalism a lot, but for those of you who are new here, I want to explain a few things to make sense of how exploitative this industry and capitalism is.
Diddy, dirty money, let's go.
One common misconception about capitalism is the belief that capitalism is simply the pursuit of money and wanting to have a lot of it and get more of it, or thinking that just having money or some power makes you a capitalist, and this isn't true. Having a good job and making a lot of money does not make you a capitalist, okay? If you do not own or control the means of production, you are a worker. Fewer industries are a more pure example of the failure of capitalism than the music industry. In the music industry, the product is art and music, and the laborer is the artist or musician. And people want good music and are willing to pay for it in some form or fashion. And the people that make the music, the artists, are the core contributors to what makes that industry work. However, to maximize their ability to make money off their music, which is only possible by getting it to the largest population that they can access, artists back in Diddy's era, in a world before streaming, they needed record companies to help. And this will require them to sign a contract with a company to be responsible to distribute their music, and the record company, the distributor, would take a cut of the profit. This wouldn't be so bad if not for the fact that over time, these record companies found ways to squeeze more and more money out of the artists while doing very little to reciprocate that value back to the artists. And that is the end result of capitalism pretty much in every situation. It always ends with, how can I make more money by getting more out of someone else? One of the ways that the record companies did this high level of exploitation of the artists was through ownership of masters or publishing rights. So you might make a song, write a song, and that song belongs to you. But in order to sign that record deal and to literally put that song on a record back in the day, the record label would require you to sign over rights to publish and distribute that song, so they get the most significant cut of the song's actual purchase on the market. In some cases, it would be 50 to even 100% of all money made off the purchase of a song when it came to actually selling copies of the song the artist made to the people that want to hear the artist's song. This sounds ridiculous and unfair, but record companies understood that they had all the leverage, and they would offer a one-time check to a hungry, starving artist in exchange to get full rights to their publishing and masters. And many artists, especially rappers, didn't even understand how that worked.
Especially with a like you, when I help get your ass out of a situation and you looking at me in my face telling me you ain't gonna do something. I can see if I told you to go rob a bank, you know what I'm saying? I'm doing I'm gonna go get some cheesecake. You got that much ego? Go do your thing, man. Don't sit here and be talking about it, man. Be fly about him. Get your swag on, walk that way.
However, industry rule number 4080, if you know, you know. You ever wonder why so many of your favorite artists go broke and claim bankruptcy? Why so many rappers seem to not actually have what they say they have in their music? Why musicians are touring in their 50s and 60s just trying to stay afloat? This is because so much of their worth, so much of the value that they brought to the world was stolen by these record labels. It's the epitome of capitalism as a system. The real value bringers in the system, the ones that make the entire industry possible, get the least amount of return on their own talent and effort. And for many of them, their best situation is putting themselves in a position to one day be the exploiter themselves. That's why so many rappers start record labels back in the day. But we're getting into territory I'll touch on again later. Just understand, exploitation is a core factor of this entire story, and it's why Puffy is who he is. When it comes to hip hop, the only weakness that these record labels had at this time period when hip hop is exploding was that they had little to no clue of what to look for in this brand new, vibrant, radical art form. And they would just be grabbing up talent left and right, not knowing which one would be valuable to exploit or which one they'd actually want to invest funds in. For every Tribe Called Quest, there's a Jungle Brothers, or worse yet, UMC or Crew. Not every rap group was going to be a huge hit. So this made men like Diddy super valuable to the labels, which is why he first got his position in the music industry. And he knew this.
Behind the scenes, they kind of intrigued me. So I started working for free. I took an internship and I would work for record companies for free, like a record company called Uptown MCA Records. Right. And that's how I got my start, from behind the scenes, just working for free. And then when a job came available, I was like one of the most likely candidates and I got a chance.
See, by the late 80s, as everyone sees the big money, we also begin to see large record labels like Gold rush in to scoop up hip hop talent. Early on, this talent would emerge organically through word of mouth and numerous wannabe players and future music execs all the time trying to find the next big thing and profit off of them. For example, take Rakim, the GOAT of this early era.
I got enough to go around, and the thought takes place uptown. I grew up on the sidewalk while I learned street talk. Then taught the whole New York. I go to Queens for Queen, get the crew from Brooklyn. Been born in Manhattan and never been taken.
He emerged as a phenomenon in the mid-80s and connected with local DJ Eric B. And they formed a partnership after connecting to another former hip-hop legend, Marley Marl, and released their first few singles under the independent Zakaya Records, ran by Robert Hill, with likely very minimal income for anyone in this early part of the work. But all of this got the attention of another future legend and owner of his own set of abuse and assault allegations, Russell Simmons, who then signed them to Island Records, ran by Chris Blackwell, and then they released their first album to critical acclaim, but technically not on Island Records. Instead, it's 4th and Broadway Records, which is under Island Records. Then the album Paid in Full was so successful that Rakim and Eric B were able to land a deal with MCA Records for $1 million. And this is the late 80s. Nothing like that was happening, and that deal would have been worth like $3 million today. That deal with MCA Records was under the leadership of Irving Azoff, where Rakim would stay for the next 6 or 7 years. Look at all these faces and names involved in capitalizing on hip-hop way back in the late 80s to the early 90s. And notice how the faces get wider when the money gets bigger, and less is going to the people closest to the art. This is what made guys like Diddy very valuable, because Diddy's only true talent was as a party promoter, which foretells some of his future crimes. His parties were able to bring in lots of people with money and power, lots of girls, lots of drugs, lots of talent, and lots of wannabe entertainers trying to get on.
Yeah, now you had a party out in the Hamptons, I guess.
Yeah.
And Bruce Willis heard it was going to be such a good party.
Yeah, he took a helicopter.
He took a helicopter to the party.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Are the parties that good?
Yeah, they crazy.
Crazy.
I ain't gonna lie.
So this left Diddy deeply connected with the club scene, the music scene, and the streets. And this allowed him to be the first to identify talent that could be pulled into the industry. Diddy was quickly scooped up by Uptown Records as an intern under one of his mentors and notable hip-hop gatekeeper, Andre Harrell. However, this didn't last long. To his credit, it seemed Diddy saw how the game was being played and felt like he deserved a bigger chunk of what was being offered. So in 1993, he left Harrell and started Bad Boy Records.
And you have your own record label now.
Yes, I have my own record label. All of my artists on my record label. I'm on my own record label. It's called Bad Boy Entertainment.
Diddy starting Bad Boy represents one of the earliest mega successes, if not the mega success in Black entrepreneurship in the music industry, where these Black men who were being basically paid off, getting one-time finder's fee, decided that they wanted to be bigger players in the hip-hop industry game. Brothers are realizing that they could make more money for longer by, and this would be a running theme, exploiting their connection to the artists by just partnering with these larger companies. Thus, we have Eazy-E with Ruthless Records in LA, Rap A Lot with Jay Prince in Houston, and of course, Def Jam started by Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons. Diddy wanted to be in that same category. However, Puff wanted to be different. He wanted to be bigger and better than that category had to offer. Puff understood hip-hop as a star-making vehicle. He saw the future in a way that nobody else did up until that point. To a great extent at this time, even as it's starting to get bigger, it's still very small, and hip-hop felt regional and insular and very self-referential in comparison. It was still at this point very inwardly focused. Rappers and hip-hop fans were trying to one-up and impress each other, as was typical of hip-hop's competitive origins and really Black culture as a whole. There was money there, but nobody was really thinking about how to expand hip-hop to its maximum capitalistic potential. This is still an era where rap music isn't even being played on most radio stations and music TV channels, even the Black ones. Nobody is thinking of hip-hop as a global phenomenon except Sean Puffy Combs.
I can't deal with what a reality is supposed to be. I have to take it to where I see it could go, where I feel it could go. I have to dream, no matter if I succeed or fail. I can never be afraid of dreaming. I think that's what's gotten me this far. This whole thing is a big dream to me.
Puff's goal was to have the biggest party possible. He didn't just want to be hot in New York, he wanted to be hot nation and worldwide. He didn't want his label and artists to compete with other rappers. He wanted his label and artists to compete with rock stars and pop stars. And most uniquely, Puff didn't want to just be the label executive behind the scenes. He wanted to be front and center as a key figure in the promotion of his company. Puff didn't just want the money, he wanted the money, power, and respect. This started out slowly with his first big breakout at Craig Mack and the mega hit Flavor in Your Ear.
You won't be around next year. My rap's too severe. Keep getting my flavor in your ear. Here comes a brand new flavor in your ear.
However, before that even fully played out, Puff had already started to focus his efforts on one Christopher Wallace, aka the Notorious B.I.G., aka Notorious Big, Biggie or Biggie Smalls, and put Big on the remix to that mega hit and released his first album, Ready to Die, before Craig Mack's first album, Project Funk the World, had even released.
I'm gonna drop for B.I.G. and Craig Mack.
September 12th is B.I.G. September 21st is Craig Mack.
As such, Funk the World received minimal push and publicity only because Puff knew what he had in Big and Ready to Die. That album was immediately labeled a classic, and Big was instantly crowned the new king of New York. Diddy had knocked it out of the park on his first at-bat and had done so in a way nobody had expected. See, Big was a rather unlikely superstar. While in private, most people that knew him described him as being magnanimous and charismatic with a bright personality, and his music presented this incredibly engaging and sometimes dark but always enthralling voice and figure that painted vivid pictures with his words. But in interviews and in public, Big was relatively subdued.
So I just stay more in the business side of everything instead of being a nigga that's gonna get drunk at the bar and fuck all the bitches and just stay in hotels all night and just trick a whole lot of money. I stay home with my wife, and watch my money.
Further, Big was not the type of guy, not the type of star, even in rap, that people were expecting. Up until that point, guys like Rakim, LL Cool J, Big Daddy Kane, they came through with really good looks to go along with their superstar personalities and personas. Rock stars had the rock star aesthetic. And of course, we had R&B really up until that point for years prior, and they would often make girls swoon and throw underwear on the stage just at their presence. But to quote Big, "Heartthrob never black and ugly as ever." But this left a really interesting role for Puff because he wanted to be valuable, he wanted to be present, and because Big didn't have that charismatic presence on screen, Puff became that for him.
I was so used to seeing Puffy face forward as a part of Bad Boy, just in general. Right? I mean, you had the 95 Source Awards, you know, where Suge Knight calls him out, and then he talks about unity.
Any artists out there want to be an artist and want to stay a star and don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the videos, all on the records, dancing, come to Death Row.
He'd been omnipresent in all the Bad Boy videos.
Yeah.
He was in all the interviews, but it always felt like it was kind of both of them to me. It almost felt like they were a bit of a duo.
Yeah,
except one of them was
being
just
Rakim, but like
right.
not really.
Right. One of them was responsible for ad-libs and hype, you know.
If you saw Big, you saw Puff. If you were interviewing Big, they were interviewing Puff. If it was a magazine cover or a music video with Big, it was a magazine cover or music video with Puff.
We banging, baby. We making music strictly for the streets. We appreciate your support, and it's all good.
You might want to look at this as exploitative, and you should. There was an underlying feeling that Puff was just there to leech off Biggie's ability and talent, and it was, but it was also iconic, and it worked. Puff didn't just help create a star just through his presence, though. He also guided the music, and in doing so, popularized an image that shifted the whole genre. I'm gonna oversimplify this next part, but let's talk a little bit about hip-hop sampling and break beats, all right? Just follow me for the hardcore hip-hop nerd shit for a second, which, I mean, if you're watching this, in this section, what else could you actually ask for?
1, 2, 3, oh.
Feels so good.
In the early 90s, rap music was still dominated by gangster rap, as well as the more purist adjacent stuff like Tribe Called Quest, Public Enemy, etc. But all of it was still very sample and breakbeat heavy. And by sample or breakbeat, I'm talking about small sections of other songs that hip hop looped together.
My hands, that's one thing.
Hip hop is a child of jazz, funk, R&B, rock and roll, right? And if you know anything about those genres, you know that regardless of the core melody of a song, there were always these little flourishes that was a break beat or an intro or an outro. It was these cool things that happened in these songs, but only for a moment. And hip hop came along and said, why not just make that the whole song? Why don't we take this 10-second, 20-second piece of a song that everyone knows and loves and loop that shit into its own melody? And that's what Kool Herc did back in '73. And that's really one of the true amazing but overly simple pieces of magic that hip hop gives us.
These niggas talking out of their neck, don't put no coffin out of yo. I'm way too paranoid for it. Let's get it, bro. BOT, the money parables, the last one is better. It's a lot of goofies with a check, I mean.
But this also means that a lot of early hip hop was producers digging into the same crates that all of them owned and trying to find different pieces of melodies, and all of them can't be as classic as the intro to that Barry White joint, which itself has been sampled over 300 times. Naturally, it becomes harder and harder to make unique, dynamic beats, so Puff took a very lazy but extremely effective new angle. Again, Puff is a promoter, a party thrower, and he realized that the biggest successes, the most money that hip hop had to offer was getting the party started. He was the anti-JPEG mafia. He didn't want to wow the rap nerds at the time with his sampling and creativity and expertise with a bunch of musty dudes nodding their heads in the basement. He wanted the ladies to come, dress real nice, drink, and then get loose to these easy melodies. So to do that, Diddy figured, why are we just sampling one part of this great disco song? Why don't we just take the whole song?
Everybody was chasing Dr. Dre and how he was able to make sounds come out of his speakers. right? And so you look at Doggy Style was the biggest rap album probably ever at that point in time.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody was, Doggy Style is sampled at the beginning of Ready to Die. And, you know, Biggie even makes reference to, depending on how you listen to it, take it, maybe it's an entendre, to Snoop falling off after with the Dogfather or whatever. But, you know, that was super sample based. The G-Funk era was still within the realms of artistic sampling, I think, for most people.
Yeah.
And Diddy was like, you know, we just gonna take all the More Money, More Problems for the hook, right? I looked at that as more, when I look back at it, I look at that as more of a positive thing because I think it exposed more people to where a lot of the samples were coming from.
True.
Like I think more people, especially kids, were getting exposed to a totally different generation of music in whole. Like at the same time though, don't get me wrong, I definitely was in a lot of critical conversations about Diddy. That style of sampling also felt lazy. It felt lazy. It felt like, you know, all the things that we love about producers all of a sudden became less relevant. And there's a lot of things that Diddy did over his career, or Diddy said over his career, to me had that impact on the rap industry or how people viewed success of rap albums.
If the song got people to dance and move in the 70s and 80s with someone singing over it, surely it could get people to dance and move in the 90s with someone rapping over it. He wasn't the first to do this, of course, but he was definitely the first to make it his entire style as a producer. And Ready to Die was a perfect example of this. Most of Ready to Die is your typical, at the time, New York mafioso gangster rap, but it did have a few tracks like Juicy, which took the entire melody and even its chorus from the 80s hit from Intune's Juicy Fruit.
You're the only love that gives me good and
Then the second single, Big Papa, followed the same success by sampling the Isley Brothers Between the Sheets. And the final single, One More Chance, is actually a remix to the original album version. The album version of One More Chance is a traditional New York style hip hop track. The single version, however, uses a sample and the chorus from a DeBarge song of the same name. With these three singles being huge radio hits, Ready to Die was able to be a huge success that penetrated parts of the rap landscape that nobody knew existed at the time. And to give credit, this also brought attention to Biggie's unparalleled lyricism and wordplay in songs like Warning or Unbelievable, or the darkly introspective tracks like Suicidal Thoughts. It was genuinely the best of both worlds, and at the time it felt like a great evolution and revolution in hip hop. It meant that we could have the hardcore, high-end hip hop shit be popular and get to all the people. It would make the art form grow and make people get rich. There was nothing to complain about if you weren't paying good attention. Diddy would repeat this formula over and over for the next decade with Mace and the Lox, 112, even Jay-Z. It was impossible to turn on black radio in the mid to late 90s and not hear Bad Boy, and it influenced an entire era that would eventually be called the Shiny Suit era after Puff. He was changing the game, and unlike his forebearers, he was also making a lots of money off his music and his artists on his label. There's a world where this continues in perpetuity, but as you know, Notorious Big was murdered on March 9, 1997, only a few weeks before his second album, the eerily titled Life After Death, was set to drop. Biggie's death shook the world, as it was the second hip-hop legend in less than a year to be murdered following the death of Tupac the previous September. There's a lot of stories about Biggie's death and the currently unsolved nature of it, some of which cast suspicious light on Diddy. Big allegedly wanted to leave Diddy. This isn't fully confirmed, but strongly rumored. And considering how Puff would treat all his artists from that point on, it is plausible.
Now, it was this documentary that claimed, which we know wasn't true.
Yeah, check this out. We don't talk about things that are nonsense. We don't even entertain nonsense, my brother. So we're not even going to go there, with all due respect, but I appreciate you as a journalist asking. Thank you.
Because you listen, 7 years ago, I'd have been like, yo, did you hire somebody to kill Pac? But no, you do it like a journalist.
Yeah, no, I mean, we wouldn't even get into nonsense like that. You know what I'm saying? It's nonsense.
Which we never believed, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
So many imply that Puff may have had something to do with Biggie's death. I didn't do the research on this theory, and I don't want to make this the focus of the video. What I will do is discuss how Biggie's death is one of the best things to ever happen to Diddy, and arguably one of the worst things to ever happen to him.
You know, we still missing, ain't nothing. It don't get no better. A lot of people say like time heals wounds. Big should be here. Tupac should.
I was so used to seeing Puffy face forward as a part of Bad Boy, just in general. When after he passes and Every Breath You Take comes out, it actually felt, well, yeah, of course this is what happened. Yeah, of course Diddy got to make a song for Biggie. Yeah, of course. Now maybe how big that song got surprised some people.
See, like yesterday, we used to rock the show. I lace the track, you lock the flow.
A few months after Biggie's death, Diddy released the song "I'll Be Missing You," a sentimental tribute to his fallen friend. It was a huge hit, again using Diddy's formula of recycling classic, well-established melodies, this time being somewhat different, as instead of an old soul or R&B song, it pulled from the Police's classic ballad, Every Breath You Take.
That has lost someone that they truly love.
Every breath you take.
It also won Diddy a Grammy and was the first rap song to make it to the top of the Billboard Top 100, spending 11 weeks there. It was a fitting tribute from a friend to his fallen peer and celebrated as such. I never liked this song. I don't know how hot of a take that is today. I definitely wasn't saying it back then, but I legit don't think I've ever listened to this song all the way through on purpose. Aside from it feeling icky, even to me as a young man back then, Diddy also is just a really, really bad rapper. It's amazing because he has this incredibly engaging persona in public and when people talk to him, but as soon as he gets on the mic, all of that goes away. He is a black void of charisma and magnetism. And it's apparent on this and every song from Diddy in this era. He got better over time, but just no. And then on top of that, it felt a bit performative. On some level, it was obvious Diddy would do a tribute to his friend, but the magnitude of it and the way it rewarded Diddy never sat well with me. Because this song propelled Diddy into superstar rapper status, and he became really one of the first truly international rap superstars as probably the worst rapper rapping at the time. Despite that, the whole of the culture got behind them, even if some of the purists and, hardcore fans weren't really fans of Diddy because, again, he couldn't rap. They respected Big and Big's legacy enough to not say much of anything.
For someone who's just like, fuck the collective, I just want the capitalism, which is a Puffy.
Right.
Keeping proximity to like a CL Smooth, a Pete Rock, these men who would in some wavelength be peddling in this kind of hotep, just for shorthand, theology, keeping them and having access to them, even a Rakim. I'm saying this because I used to work at Cornerstone Promotions, which had the 300 mixtape. So all these men would like walk through the office.
And suddenly Diddy, a demonstrably bad rapper, not mid, not decent, outright bad, was being spoken of in the same breath as the top tiers like Nas and Jay-Z at the time. This wasn't a good thing.
They're finishing Life After Death, and they had songs for No Way Out that were kind of in process anyway, right? So you get Life After Death that comes out, I think in March, maybe?
Something
I know he died.
It came out like the week after he died, or maybe the week he did that he died. And then No Way Out is like June.
Yeah. And so that's fast, because now you have two albums that are both number ones, and both have number one songs, and both have number one songs on them. You have Mo Money Mo Problem going at the same time as Every Breath You Take,
right?
And so all of that it felt tragic that Big died, of course, but it was very logical for me at that same time. I don't think I even thought about it being nefarious in the same way. Now, of course, there was all the speculation.
In hindsight, it feels very nefarious, especially a few months later, Diddy would release his first solo album, No Way Out, which also debuted at #1, sold millions of copies. And even though it wasn't a traditional solo album, as half of it is more like a bad boy artist showcase, think like how We the Best, what's that dude's name? What's this dude's name?
We the Best.
Fuck is this dude's name?
This is called what?
That's just avocado toast.
This is called what?
Turkey sausage.
This is called what?
Turkey bacon.
And this is called what?
Veggie scramble.
And what is this?
Those are pickled banana peppers.
And what is this?
Berries and seeds.
And perhaps what is this?
Water.
Think of like how DJ Khaled does his albums, where he's not really doing anything specific except yelling in the background half the time. And Puffy did more than that. He did have several solo songs on this album, but pretty much all those songs are horrible. Regardless, it made huge waves in the rap world, with Every Breath You Take being the first single, and then this next single being All About the Benjamins. All About the Benjamins is one of those hip-hop events where I cannot express to you the magnitude of the moment adequately. You just had to have been there. The song redefined the concept of street banger. The only songs I can think of that had a similar impact on the culture at once would maybe be like Rough Riders Anthem from DMX in '98.
And here we go. Travis, he had a black
a milli from Wayne back in 06, 07.
A million here, a million there, Sicilian girl with long hair, with work and a dairy, yeah.
Bad and Bougie from the Migos a couple of years ago.
I feel like there's like a running joke with you being left off Bad and Bougie.
I ain't left off Bad and Bougie. You think I'm left off Bad and Bougie?
Say again?
You say I'm left off Bad and Bougie?
What'd you say?
You say I'm left off Bad and Bougie?
Yeah.
Do it look like I'm left off Bad and Bougie?
What'd you say?
Do it look like I'm left off Bad and Bougie?
Nah, I mean, it don't look like it.
And Not Like Us earlier this year.
Peace your ass and hide the Bible if God watching. Sometimes you gotta pop out and show niggas. Certified boogeyman, I'm the one that up the soul with them.
Like, if you're one of those people that's like, they're playing Not Like Us too much, please believe me, you would have hated All About the Benjamins.
What you wanna do? Wanna be ballers, shot ballers, brawlers.
And imagine like hearing that song all the time and it's not streaming. It's on the radio, it's on all the videos, it is constantly being played. Because at this time, we don't control what music we hear. There is no Spotify or Apple Music. You turn on the radio and you hear what they want to play, and they wanted to play All About the Benjamins, and we were perfectly fine.
Drinking more liquor, dropping the pro figure. I'm with most sippers, watch my gold diggers.
And unironically or paradoxically, or I don't know, Diddy didn't do much to this song. He's at the beginning and it's like, all right, thank you, Diddy. You can get out the way now. And after that is Jada Kiss and Chic Luch from The Lox without Styles P for goofy reasons I'll let you Google. And then Lil' Kim jumps on and she basically bursts an entire genre of female rappers to this day with the first line she says.
What with the pin, huh?
Yeah. Like, this may not seem like much now. Like, out of context, this is like, okay, that's cute. In context, if you were there and you were a semi-interested female rap fan, that line made a lot of girls pick up the notebook. Like, they were there for that. And then, of course, it had Biggie with a verse at the end. So I didn't like Every Breath You Take, right? But this I got jiggy with. It even had a rock remix, which was still pretty good. But that wasn't the end. Diddy's album No Way Out was full of these moments, a true classic of the era, again with relatively minimal work from Diddy by himself, which was good because he sucked. But still, it managed to somehow censor him as the star of the show, regardless of the fact that he wasn't who you were really coming to see. And it made him into a top tier rapper to the culture and the greater world of hip hop fandom, which is kind of bad. Like, the songs that are just Diddy are really, really bad. And furthermore, it's well understood at this time that Diddy didn't even write his own rhymes. He had Biggie, The Lox, Mace, and others writing for him, and he was still awful. So this is a problematic lesson to teach not just Diddy, but the rest of the rap game, that if you're thinking like I'm thinking, we see the ramifications of to this day.
And there's a lot of things that Diddy did over his career, or Diddy said over his career, to me had that impact on the rap industry or how people viewed success of rap albums.
Right.
You know, that whole, don't worry if I write rhymes, I write checks.
I write checks.
We're still in the shadow of that terrible take to me. We're like, hopefully this shift that's happening kicks that out the way for a long time. But that made it so that 80% could eschew the 20% that really took a lot of these things seriously. They could sort of boycott actually people who took time and talent in a traditional sense, or maybe a more nuanced sense, or more dynamic sense. Say, get out the way, we're making money now.
The key to success in this industry isn't talent and hard work, it's exploitation, exploiting the death of a legend you're connected to, exploiting the talents of your would-be collaborators, exploiting the commercial appeal of hip-hop as a whole without putting your full effort into it. Lil Bill, my arch nemesis, made a video explaining how Drake wasn't the first of his kind in hip-hop, just the most dangerous evolution in a long history of rap prioritizing and refining its commercial appeal at the cost of its artistic purity and radical origins. It's a great video, go watch it, but I disagree with one piece of the formula he left out, which is, yeah, Drake should be compared to LL Cool J, Ja Rule, even Jay-Z, but to me, the true first Drake is Puff. In fact, I'd argue that Puff is more responsible for the deterioration of hip-hop and hip-hop culture than any singular figure throughout hip-hop history.
How you end up on the couch? Close your mouth. Why you looking at me like that, ugly ass nigga?
And please believe, much like Drake, Puff had pushback, but he was too good at making hits, too powerful, and eventually too iconic for people to really hold negative opinions of him for too long. Puff couldn't rap, but Puff was a vibe. And really, he was the vibe. I'd argue that the emergence of Diddy includes an era where, at least in terms of popularity, hip-hop is at its peak. This swag, if you will, which of course directly connects to Puffy's persona, and that swag is the iconic images of Puffy and his peers dancing in shiny suits with Hype Williams directed video.
When I look at myself, God has blessed me with a gift, reach a lot of people, and I've been able to make a lot of things cool. from the dances that I do to the way my artists look, at the styling of the artists.
The idea of Diddy was synonymous with the high life, partying, fun, getting money, and hustling. Today, this doesn't seem like a big deal because this is what hip hop has looked like for 20 years now. But I remember the 80s and the early 90s. I remember early Tribe Called Quest and the Ghetto Boys and Boogie Down Production when rap felt more insular and underground and organic. And although I didn't know what I know today to see how concerned we should have been at Diddy popping up with these shiny suits, I didn't care then, and if I'm fair to myself, I shouldn't have, because it was too fucking fun, and it really did, regardless of its flaws, push hip-hop into a new stratosphere. Again, I want to remind you that rap music wasn't universally played on black radio probably until the mid-90s as Puff becomes this megastar. It was too dangerous or too edgy or whatever else, and like that's how black art has always been treated. But today, Snoop Dogg, at one point the most controversial rapper in the game, is holding the torch at the Olympics in Paris or wherever they were this year. Hip hop early on was this musical boogeyman that was set to be limited to this specific role that, you know, was nice for us, but it also did limit what was possible. And now, because of Puff's effort, for better or for worse, it was this global phenomenon. As iconic as early artists like Run DMC, Rakim, and Curtis Blow were, they weren't selling out stadiums. They weren't doing huge world tours like their white counterparts, at least not regularly toward the beginning. They were getting crumbs by comparison. And even today, so many of those older rappers who helped shape the culture don't have money because they just didn't have control over what they were making. But when Diddy came and became hip hop's first true celebrity megastar and mogul, he ushered in that explosion in popularity that allowed him and other power brokers in hip hop to push into industries and commercial endeavors well beyond the original scope of the culture. But as awesome as this era was, it was still setting a dangerous precedent. Understand that Diddy got this big because he learned the major key to thriving in a capitalist society. Exploitation equals money. Find people with something you want and something you can exploit value from, and ensure that they're in a weaker position than you so that you can have power over their talent, over their value, and then take that.
And then that's when Puffy came in. He was like, take that.
Before we go too much further, I do want to be very clear about something. As I said earlier, the shiny suit era was amazing.
Yo, what you know about going out, head west, red legs, TVs, all up in the headrest. Try live it up, rock juice, big and chalk, piece up, lit it up, stick 'em kid. Bad boy. You make me so good. You know you made me feel so good. You know you made me feel so good.
That's
Where
what
you
we
at?
know. There's great hip hop in any era, including today, but for my money, the 90s was hip hop's creative peak. I'm going to rattle off a list of classics from that decade, and it will probably be different from the last time I did this in a video. So let's just see East 1999 Eternal, Coming Out Hard, Moment of Truth, The Infamous, Aquemini, Philadelphia Half-Life, Lethal Injection, and so on. This is my most old head take. It will remain the same. All that said, while creatively and musically, the 90s are unparalleled, that era between 2000 and 2010, the era greatly shaped by Diddy, the shiny suit, bling, blog era, is by far the high point of hip hop's popularity. What are some of your favorite memories of hip hop and hip hop culture from the 90s and the 2000s era before you had to like engage with the dark underbelly? You know?
Listen, I think two things can still be true.
Right.
Right? And one of the things that I grapple with the most that I shared with my 60-year-old boss at the time, this is in 2008, when I really began to explore this world, was, oh my God. And her name is Kathy McCullough. I'm like, Kathy, you have to listen to 8 Ball and MJG. Let me let you hear Space Age Pimpin' because we have been rapping
new things.
We've been rapping every word our entire lives.
If people would fly out to the Grammys, no ticket, no acts, really Netta and Charles in it, and just get into the gifting suites. And and as soon as Instagram popped off, and before Instagram it was MySpace and really more Twitter, and folks could get on Twitter and post themselves up in different places. And this is during the blog era too, man, things are really coming back. Oh shit, bruh. A lot of like this is in the era, like this is the early social media era where particularly a lot of young black men are able to launch music careers by going viral via a blog. But like young black men were able to get their rap careers launched off, and then the labels would just stick them in a van and ship them off to South by Southwest or to some festival in Puerto Rico, and they would do the festival circuit touring around. A lot of nasty work happens in that space.
The 2000s was an incredibly tumultuous time, though you wouldn't necessarily know it by looking at pop culture. The presidency of George W. Bush was full of unilateral and clandestine warfare. 9/11 happened, and the concept of global terrorism was etched into the American psyche along with the inception of our modern surveillance state. The crack era was dying, yes, but the meth era was on the rise. The AIDS epidemic was still happening. There was an economic collapse and a recession in the late 2000s, and that's just the things that we knew about that were carried on our news and airwaves. There were plenty of things happening that weren't even allowed to make a blip on our social or cultural radar at the time because we didn't have social media to inform us. But in the middle of all of that, hip hop was experiencing its most popular and lucrative era. I don't know if glamour is the right word. I'll let you kind of depict it the way you want. But like the fly lifestyle that you were a dancer at top 3 strip club in the country, right?
Right.
And so you saw these people come in and throwing money, and it was like a video.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I remember
they made videos in there.
Right.
Times.
I'll never forget. It might have been the one time I actually saw you there and they did a surfboard move.
Yeah, the swag surf.
And that shit was amazing. Right?
Yeah.
So like I don't wanna act like I'm not gonna, and I don't want to act like, oh, strip clubs are awful and everybody needs to be ashamed to put their clothes on and whatever. Like, no, shit is dope.
I had a hell of a time.
Right.
Like I was just telling somebody the other day, trying to explain this whole lifestyle to them. I was like, when Jeezy said, I got nights, I can't remember nights, I was like, no, I felt that in my soul. Like we would be going so hard, it was almost shameful. Not even on no predatory shit. You just get too drunk. You know what I'm saying? Like just because they would party all, like it wasn't just like the clubs would close and then those individuals can pay to keep the clubs open. Like there were several Mondays at Magic City that somebody would pay to keep the club open. They pick out like 10 girls and keep the club open like an extra 2 hours. I don't remember the exact deals. Like each one would get a different deal. But the management was pretty cool at trying to take care of us, especially too, of course. So like the dudes would have like a bar minimum and they'd have to buy so many ones and, you know, spend them during this hour or two. And so that would be that. So like the club was already closed at 3 and now you there till 5. And then you got to count all this goddamn money between 10 girls. Like it's 7 or 8 before you get home.
Jeez. That also sounds awesome. It might be because of how troublesome the time was that someone like Diddy was so popular, because his infectious energy made us all forget what was really happening, even as he was in our face telling us to vote or die. I will never forget that campaign. That one was wild.
Puff Daddy?
Your friend Kyle told me you don't understand the importance of voting. Apparently you haven't heard of my vote or die campaign.
Vote or die? What the hell does that even mean?
What you think it means, bitch.
Diddy helped create an image of hip hop that was still full of bravado and swag and edge, but without the genuine danger or fear inducing radicalism that hip hop had in the previous decade. The resistance to hip hop died down and the dollar signs livened up, and suddenly commercially viable crossover rap was everywhere. Rappers that would have been much more street or gritty like a DMX or a Cameron suddenly became more flashy and party-oriented. There were a series of commercial hits from well-established legends like LL Cool J, Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, and the criminally underrated Busta Rhymes. Newcomers in the 2000s such as Ludacris and Nelly and Lil Jon released mega hit after mega hit. And then there were a million different one-hit wonders that gave us amazing moments like Chingy, Murphy Lee, Slim Thug, D4L. Hardcore fans and purists even still got fed with the Locks and the Roots and Slum Village, Mos Def, Common, Talib Kweli, and early Kanye West. And even the women of hip hop had strong representation, as this is Missy's most dominant era, and we get great moments from Eve and Trina, and an underrated classic from Rod Digger that nobody talks about enough. And all of this is happening while Kanye and Wayne are on like legendary runs that are paralleling each other, but somehow not crossing over, but creating like this yin and yang of all the amazing things that hip hop are able to do. Another cool thing happening is that we see the emergence of the mega hit like star producer. But again, Diddy made it so that being just the hit maker behind the scenes made you a star as well. This is when we first start getting the producer tag, like Just Blaze.
Pump it up. Just Blaze.
Just Blaze. I really like doing it. I'm sorry. The Neptunes had their boom, boom, boom. Swizzy, Scott Storch, Timbaland, a bunch of others, again, I can't think of. Not everybody was doing the tag thing, but it was so many producers that were stars in and of themselves. You just wanted to hear what they were gonna do with a particular rap star.
How many of y'all love hip hop?
Hip hop in the 2000s was a moment for a lifetime. It was ubiquitous. It was a party like no other. You couldn't turn on the TV or the radio and not see hip hop in its shiniest, loudest, funnest, coolest, most commodifiable form.
I met this girl when I was 10 years old. What I love most, she had so much soul. Mike, check it out.
Some saw the commercialization and money chase and the materialism as a detrimental thing long term. Some saw the road that this path would eventually lead us to.
It ain't nothing like hip hop music. It ain't nothing like hip hop music.
But even those folks, many of them purists, weren't paying attention to the big problem below the surface.
She's universal.
Because yeah, it was a party circa 1998 to 2010, but the party was only happening to this level because of certain folks that didn't get enough credit. But if you've ever been to a party, you know that for it to be good, it has to have three things: music, alcohol, and the most significant part of this story that I haven't gotten to yet, women.
Stressing how hardcore and real she is. Really the realest before she got into showbiz. I did her, not just to say I did it, but I'm committed. But so many brothers hit it, she's not the same letting all these groupies do her. I see Mark slamming her and taking her to the sewer. I'ma take her back, hoping that the shit stop. Who I'm talking about, y'all? Hip hop.
That around people's album release, is you got to do the whole city. You got to do the whole circuit.
Yeah.
When you're getting ready to let an album out. And so like Jeezy used to bring them up in there a lot. Tip came through. And then whoever else, I can't remember everybody right now, but like, you know, all of our locals, whenever you needed to drop your single, everybody knew you got to take it to the strip club first.
So actually, so that brings up a big point. We'll transition somewhat. Is like, I don't think people fully appreciate how intertwined hip hop became with the strip club.
So it was both ends of the spectrums because all of those strip club DJs worked with local artists. Like all of them had hoop aspirations too, right? As a dancer, you are a big fish in a small pond. Like you can't fit every bad bitch in Atlanta in Magic City. Like that's not the breadth of them. There were hundreds of thousands of just non-stripper girls walking around Atlanta who were absolutely beautiful. But when you walk into Magic City, that's my domain, right? And if you are a top 5 in Magic City, or any strip club, any strip club, because you know White Chocolate didn't work with us. So at Magic City, she ran her own shit at Strokers, and that's why she stayed there, because she ran that shit, and I respect. Like that's how you do it. It was definitely a reversal of power sometimes, right? Like those men are in there and they're overwhelmed with all the selections, and you pick what you want.
And here's where things rightfully get uncomfortable. So let's start out with a little story. The year is 1999, and I'm 17 years old, sitting at home watching music videos on TV, because that's where we used to watch music videos. And suddenly it's this new video from probably my favorite rapper at the time, Busta Rhymes, off his most recent album, Extinction Level Event. And it's one of my favorite songs, Tear the Roof Off / Party Going On Over Here.
Tear the roof off, yo. Wet my crew, yo. Let me get you off, yo. I know what to do, okay?
As I said in a previous video on the B-sides, Busta doesn't get enough credit as a rapper, especially considering the incredibly dominant run he was on in the late 90s to the early 2000s, and his ability to be like super lyrical, street, but also make club bangers, seamlessly moving between them all. And Tear the Roof Off was a perfect example, because it started out with Tear the Roof Off, which is like this classic street banger, and then moved into a club banger at the end of it, or not the end, like the middle. You gotta go watch it or whatever. But here's the thing, if I'm being real, I don't even remember the Tear the Roof Off part of the song. All I remember is Party Going Over Here for one particular reason. Old girl in the white dress. Before I even show this, I know there are men my age having flashback to those teenage years who already know who and what I'm talking about. Even though there are multiple men in this video wearing white dresses, we know the one I'm talking about. Now, today in the progressive, sexually liberated, and let's be honest, overly pornified time of the 2020s, this bit of underboob is rather tame. But in the late 90s, this much side or underboob was literally too much for TV. So much, in fact, that it was actually censored on BET and MTV, which in some ways brought more attention because now my horny teenage brain just wanted to see exactly what was being covered up. In a time without OnlyFans and 1G internet, your imagination as a young man was your best friend or some tapes that one of your uncles left lying around without hiding properly. So blurred out or implied nudity was as enticing as hardcore penetration. So I would find myself always watching to see what Miss White Dress was hiding, to see if there was some detail or angle that they missed that I could catch. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that I would actually get to see the video in all its glory because of a show called BET Uncut. BET Uncut was a show that aired late night on BET. Wikipedia says it aired at 3 a.m. I couldn't find any other sources for it, but my hazy memory tells me that it had to come on early. I feel like it was more like 11 p.m. because I wouldn't stand up at 3 a.m. to watch BET Uncut. I feel like, you know, the Gooner brain at the time may have made me feel like it was different, but I swear at 11:30 I was able to see some, you know, video ads, but maybe I'm wrong. I want to talk about Uncut because while it doesn't have anything explicit to do with Diddy, it has everything to do with what hip hop was becoming as the party was going on in the 2000s. Uncut was something new for the hip hop world. Pretty girls are nothing new to any hot-blooded, male-oriented genre of music, whether it be the heroin chic models in the background of Robert Palmer's Simply Irresistible or the 80s rock girls literally having cherry pies fall in their crotch from Warrant's Cherry Pie video. And hip-hop had its share of video girls way back in the 80s, but Tear the Roof Off and Uncut was an escalation and a change in the tone of things. It's hard to perfectly explain the transition, but the best way I can put it is while video models in earlier eras of hip hop were sexy and attractive, the video models that came in 2000, better known as video vixens for a while, were also sexy and attractive, but different. The vibes were different, and we gotta unpack why those vibes weren't that good. One of the best ways to like show this difference is just in the aesthetic. While it's expected that fashion trends will change over time, we're also talking about changes in their bodies and phenotypical standards. Older hip hop and R&B videos do have their fair share of lighter skinned women, but darker skinned black women were much more prominent and typical as main features in the media. Also, the bodies of these women erred on the side of thin and dancer-like, probably because a lot of these women were professional models and dancers. This still presented some challenges to darker skinned black women as it pertained to beauty standards, but it wasn't yet what fellow video essayist Khadijah Mbow labeled as the rise of the slim, thick video girl. In the Vixen era, we saw the rise and focus on black women with some serious curves. Bodies had always been loved and appreciated in black culture, but not centered in the media, not seen as the epitome of black feminine desirability. Buffy the Body, Melissa Ford, Ketoy Johnson, and my personal all-time fave, Bria Miles. These women reset the standard for idealized body types for black women at a new, pretty much unattainable level. And you can argue that their popularity with these types of bodies in the 2000s is why we have a rise in certain surgeries for black women today. In fact, looking at the bodies that we see with vixens in the 2000s and the early 2010s, they seem small and tame compared to some of the extreme body proportions that we've normalized today. On top of the bodies, there was also the phenotype. Colorism, which has always been a thing in black culture, became much more prominent in this era. Those dark-skinned women that were prominent in the 80s and 90s were pushed to the side or outright left out for lighter skin, smaller, more exotic features, and or biracial or ambiguous blackness, which became the standard, making for an even more extreme erasure of dark-skinned black women that's happening in the media right now. There were so many awful things with this era, and there was pushback. There's notoriously the story of Tip Drill by Nelly, probably the Shawshank Redemption of uncut videos. This song, which was meant to be played in the strip club from jump, so let's like appropriately situated if we're gonna try to be fair, features Nelly and his group, the Saint Lunatics. Name 4 Saint Lunatics. Name 4. Were there 4? There might have only been 2. I don't know. I remember Murphy Lee. That's all I got for y'all. Anyway, Nelly and the Saint Lunatics invited a bunch of strippers to a mansion for a party, and they just had a ball. There's butts and thighs and boobs everywhere, and it's a good time if you take it at face value. These are ostensibly all consenting adults. Big money rappers are paying to see these dancers for their time and talents, and nobody was hurt, depending on your feelings about the male gaze and objectification. There may have been a moment where a man slid a credit card between a woman's butt cheeks that, of course, you're only seeing if you're watching the Nebula version. But while the culture as a whole saw this as good, clean fun, others recognized the implicit harm not necessarily being done to anyone involved, but from the growing misogyny in hip hop. Because the Vixen era wasn't just about like explicit victims suffering in silence, it was also about a very strong, growing shift in perceptions and attitudes towards women and sex, especially Black women and Black sex. Make no mistake, the commodification of women is nothing new. Sex work is nothing new. Misogyny is nothing new. It should not be seen as this uniquely Black male thing, which is too often the case. But I have to recognize that the magnitude of sex on sale in hip hop at the time was different and low-key unprecedented, at least for hip hop culture. The overt connection between sex and access to it and success in hip hop was different. Little known underground rap artists could spend, I don't know, a tax refund check and hire some strippers and shoot a video and then suddenly have their video be on cable TV, on BET Uncut, exposed to hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of new eyes. Rappers and wannabe moguls used to need talent and personality and a bit of luck to get on, but now all they had to do was buy access to Black women's bodies. Before, these women were there for show and maybe for a good time, but now more than ever, they were there to validate the legitimacy of who brought them in. And most significantly, as the viewer, they were there for you. Again, Khadijah explains this pretty well. Sometimes after that tip drill video blew up, Spelman College, the historically Black all-women's college in Atlanta, that's one of the top colleges, pretty much period, and inarguably the top college for Black women in the country. Someone invited Nelly to do a bone marrow drive. Nelly had become a cancer advocate in the name of his sister, who would eventually die of leukemia. The backlash to this video, however, caused an uproar, as many of the women at Spelman felt some type of way that a man that had been recently seen sliding a credit card between a Black woman's butt cheeks was going to just waltz into the most prestigious school for Black women ever and not at least have a conversation about what he was doing with his art. And this, of course, didn't really go well. There's a lot of misinformation about this event, which I know firsthand. This story ended up getting national news coverage, and they made it seem like Spelman students were just looking to hold large-scale protests. It was just a bunch of women not letting a man have a good time, but that wasn't really the case. What was requested was a private conversation. It's really sadly emblematic of how Black women often do have to confront some Black men with the most gentle, softest energy. But they really wanted to just call him in as opposed to call him out. But for Nelly, this was a bridge too far, and he canceled the event. Something he still seemed mad about in 2013 when he says he blames the women at Spelman for his sister's death. At the time, especially with the disingenuous framing of the story, I sided with Nelly. He was trying to do something good with his fame. He shouldn't have to face protests.
I asked everybody that didn't like it. I said, what did I do wrong? I said, it may not have been within your taste, but what did I really do wrong?
I also then, and still to an extent now, feel like there's a way that these types of conflicts do strip the agency from the women involved and becomes kind of just fun policing.
They're grown. It's not like she was a child. It's not like I manipulated her into thinking. You see what I'm saying? And if you really had a problem with what I was doing, why wouldn't you go to them and ask her? You know what I'm saying? Why not interview the girl and say, how did you let somebody do that to you? And then if she feels bad, then you can come to me and say, yo, you made her feel bad. But see, everyone didn't ask. Nobody asked her. Everyone came directly to me with that shit.
There is sometimes a lazy analysis of these things as if all of these women and all of these men are operating in a completely imbalanced power dynamic where the women can only be exploited, not actually having agency or enjoying what they do. In fact, this is a strongly believed rumor that from my time in school was absolute fact, but I couldn't find any corroboration right now, so I have to say this with a grain of salt. But there were Spelman girls in the tip drill video. But that's really mostly FD from the mid-2000s in the middle of this era, not FD that's gotten older, done more research, done more reading, and has a better understanding of how these things work. This is not the FD that actually worked in anti-sex trafficking and unfortunately knows that even good, clean fun has unintended consequences for other people you're not thinking about while you're having that fun. Diddy is not unique. He was preceded again by Epstein and Weinstein and a bunch of other people to whom we've never heard their names. One of the biggest abusers and sexual weirdos of all time might be president by the time this video comes out. But there is something to say, something that other scholars of Black masculinity try to, not agree with will say, that recognizes that there are certain black men seeking to play out that masculine role power fantasy in the ways that we've watched white men do for generations, going all the way back to the James Bonds and hairband era that we just saw in the 90s. Black men have often witnessed white men do pretty much whatever they desired with women while being blocked from any consequences. And black men are blocked from the economic and social capital to make such power possible. And while I think a lot of black men would argue they are not imitating white masculinity when performing misogyny and patriarchy with our own women, I think it'd be incredibly facetious, especially at a time when half the rappers were imitating mafia crime bosses in their music, to say that that wasn't an effect. What we see in hip hop with Puff and with all these other figures who may or may not be pulled down with Puff is the imitation of the patriarchal ideal, which comes with the idea that as a man with money and power and respect, I can do whatever I want with women as long as I have those three things over them. And even as I want to defend hip hop and always point out that culture influences art and not the other way around, I can't lie and say that being inundated with that imagery and that energy changed the way I perceive the world around me. Even I, as a guy that was never much of a ladies' man, still engage with women in a very specific and often bordering on toxic way. I remember being in college and harboring certain negative attitudes. I remember hearing things about girls and witnessing things that I thought maybe were wrong, but thought, man, I shouldn't say anything. That's not my place. And I'm not gonna blame it completely on the culture that was surrounding me at the time, but I will say that that conversation that Spelman was trying to have to confront Nelly to help educate and shine light on the problems of this culture being unchallenged in the way we consume and perceive it, I definitely could have benefited from that then and definitely benefited from that over time as I got older. I want to be clear, I am not alone, and I'm on the mild side of things because so many people, male and female, attached to this culture, attached to this industry, attached to the music, have way more skeletons in their closet than many of them would like to admit. Mind you, this is an industry being ran by the same people that started Freaknik at the time. I always have to bring up the fact that one, I was too young to actually go to Freaknik. I just want to make sure that's clear. But if you're under the age of 30, please understand, these are your parents I'm talking about. This is who was in charge of the culture at the time.
Atlanta is the strip club mecca. And when I was in college 25 years ago, if you were a stripper, you went to the next state and you hit it. You didn't want anybody to know, and you were doing it because you needed money to pay for college. That was what my understanding was. Right. It is a celebration now to be a dancer. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but I do think that that was because it was accepted and glorified by the hip hop community. Had it not been accepted or glorified by the hip hop community, it would remain in its own space as a place where wealthy people go and spend money and have a level of entertainment. The thing about the adult entertainment industry is that young people and vulnerable people automatically get caught up in it.
There's no real separation of those economies. Like you
would like to separate it, but you really can't, to be honest, because you get caught up in it.
I always thought the Me Too movement would never be able to dismantle the urban music industry.
Explain.
Because when the Me Too movement was popping off, it was very white woman centric and it was very woman good, man bad. And my favorite quote from Bell Hooks is patriarchy has no gender.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly in the urban music industry, from my experience, the women might not be the doers, but they were the enablers, they were the handlers, they were the facilitators. You know, when you think of assistants going to do things and booking things and getting products and making sure people were flying out, all women facilitate keeping Cassie in a room. It is a woman doing some of the more violent work that keeps people entrapped into these cycles.
We've all been hearing the whispering about who about to get questioned next. And that's gonna break my entire fucking heart. But oh well, let it burn. That's what happens. I hope they knew that when they left and stood there and did nothing, that these are some consequences of that. And they not just did nothing, but like participated supposedly.
The biggest blow to the Vixen era narrative of it being good, clean fun comes in the defining text of that era, the book Confessions of a Video Vixen by Karen Steffens, who also goes by Elizabeth Ovenson.
It's almost like there's a radar that goes out when you're a new girl in LA. Like, the guys just know you're fresh meat.
This book set the world on fire in a way that seems inconceivable today. Maybe it's because she was the first to do it, but I couldn't imagine a woman, especially a black woman, getting this much attention in mainstream media coverage for their expose on the realities of what's going on in the world of sex and hip hop behind the scenes. This was a very scandalous tell-it-all that allowed the story of a black woman being incredibly promiscuous be its core narrative device. And of course, there was a lot of pushback at the time, but it was still very much like accepted, rewarded, and focused on in the wide pop culture in a way that black women usually just don't get to do. Steffens regaled her trysts with notable rappers and black celebrities at the time, including alleged couplings with Vin Diesel, Ja Rule, Dr. Dre, Lil Wayne, Jay-Z, and of course Diddy. But what's wild is that's kind of the core thing people think about in this book, not the immense abuse and trauma and turmoil that she went through before becoming a victim to this industry or after being a victim in this industry. Steffens speaks to the ugly truth around what was happening to many of those women that were there for the good, clean fun.
Well, the relationship had been going downhill because it was an abusive relationship, and it had been almost from the start.
Okay.
So we were together for about 4 years. I had gotten pregnant earlier in the relationship and had an abortion.
You had an abortion originally?
Yes.
Okay. That was something you wanted to do or he wanted to do?
That's something that he wanted.
Okay.
So, and it was hard. I was 17, he was 27. It was difficult for me. I was 17. It was my first time being pregnant, and but that's something that he forcefully made sure happened.
She herself escaped to that lifestyle because she had come from such a harsh and abusive environment because of her father, her mother, sexual assaults that she suffered as a young lady, poverty, and even epilepsy. And she says outright in her book that this entry into the world of hip hop was first and foremost an escape. It was not really just about fun. It was her recognizing that her body could be a ticket out.
All my life I had been doing things to get money. You know what I mean? Even when I was dancing, I was giving that service to get that money. And so I had already—
When you say service, what?
Just the dancing, just the being on stage, taking your clothes off to get that $1,000.
But because of what she had went through before even entering in the industry, it allowed her to further go through that while she was in the industry.
The video world has become a cult kind of environment where you have a particular group of video girls, you know, and there are different types of video girls. You can be the dancing girl, or the model girl, the actress girl, and it's very easy to be exploited in that particular field. You have 3 minutes to prove yourself. In those 3 to 4 minutes, you have to be the most exciting, the most beautiful, the most voluptuous. It's difficult to do that and still come across as intelligent. A lot of times you can't have both, and so you end up in some way partially exploiting yourself.
And the thing that you have to recognize here is that while there are plenty of women that are there for good, clean fun and there to get paid and there to just have a good time that they can look back on, there's not like a check to make sure that every woman entering into that world was coming in with their head on straight and with no issues behind them that would make them likely to be a target for men like Diddy. Or men like Irv Gotti, who was technically married, technically probably dating Ashanti at the time, and had gotten access to Corinne Steffens from Ja Rule.
Instantly, I just started meeting people.
And you met?
The first person I bumped into out was Ja Rule at a club. And it was 5 days of nonstop sex.
And then on top of all this, it was Irv Gotti that introduced her to Diddy as a gift. This book came out in the late 2000s at the height of Diddy's popularity, so it makes sense that she's relatively nice to Diddy and describes him as a fun and charismatic guy, though she does imply the existence of freak-offs at different sections in the book and talks about Diddy once took her and another rapper she was dating, Exhibit, to a gay club. But what I want to focus on is this idea that she met Diddy as a gift from Irv Gotti. Gotti saw her as a possession and was into the idea of sharing her, giving her to other men like Diddy. And while in the book she implies it to be a fun time, when things started happening with Diddy, she talked about how she understands now that she was being shared as a commodity. And I would go further to say that this wasn't ever about her, it was about the men involved. People that know a lot about abusive men know that abuse is never about the woman, it's about power. And in fact, a lot of these powerful, deviant, predatory men low-key don't even like women. They don't really do what they do in service of women. More than anything, their energy and attention is focused on other men. They want in a way to be desired by other men. And I don't mean this in an explicitly sexual way, even though obviously this was true as it pertained to Diddy. I mean in a psychosexual, homoerotic way that doesn't really have to include actual physical sex between these two men. Now I'm getting into my barbershop philosophy bag for a second, but bear with me. You ever wonder why so many rappers end up dating the same exact women and then be mad and fighting and dissing each other over it? Like the very concerning story of Ruby Rose, who's been linked to Playboy Cardi, Drewski, Cam Newton, Soulja Boy again. But concerningly, some of the rappers she's dated, allegedly such as 21 Savage and Travis Scott, met her as a minor.
Because there are rumors about you and various famous men. I'm going to name a few.
Okay, I'll tell you which
you
ones.
could react.
Okay.
Travis Scott.
When I was younger. Oh wait, actually I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do this.
These are isolated examples, but if you're up on that particular part of hip hop culture and pop culture, you'll know that there are dozens of women that have just been, for lack of a better way of putting it, traveling around their industry dating different rappers. And it's not that those women don't deserve to be desired or loved by any particular man, but it is indicative of the fact that some of the key elements of these women's desirability is the fact that other men have had them that are also seen as powerful and significant within the industry.
The dudes that come into the club for the actual girls are not the ones throwing up ones. The ones that came in to actually see us, they're quiet about it. They gonna slide you to hundreds. They don't want the niggas around them paying attention to what they got going on because they came to pay attention to you. But I'm not saying like everybody that does this in the strip. This is fun. I throw ones in the strip club. It's fun, but it is definitely for fucking attention.
Right.
And who are you getting attention from? Like obviously the dancers were there, but the hundreds of other men in the fucking building. Everybody is looking at where all the money is coming from.
And this is not unique to the hip hop industry. This is something that happens with Black athletes, celebrities, powerful men across the board throughout history have participated in this unique phenomenon. Think of Marilyn Monroe, who dated not just brothers, but like multiple powerful men the same way that Ruby Rose did. A look into Diddy's accusations shows a pretty clear inclination that some of his abuse towards women is completely steeped in this homoerotic competition. Diddy wanted others to join him in abusing and degrading women, even at times degrading men as a bonding practice. In the accusations levied towards him regarding Cassie, it said that he paid other male prostitutes to have sex with her while he filmed, and that he would send these films to other men in the industry. The thing I think a lot of people don't understand about this type of violence towards women is that sexual assault is never really about sex. It's almost always about power and control, which is often how some men excuse their behavior when they're not being overtly violent or sexually deviant. They just see it as a part of good, clean fun. When you look at how men like Weinstein or Russell Simmons downplay their accusers, it's often in saying, well, she was there and open to it, or what do you think she was there for? She just wanted to be famous and wanted to be with the powerful men. Russell even said that he can't be a rapist because he's not beating women over the head, which is like, I'm happy that nigga's an island somewhere away from other people.
Rape is a strong allegation in some of these stories, or that you pinned women down. I mean, like bad stuff, you know, either happened or it didn't, right?
Yeah, well, you know, it's a serious word, but I think they've changed the meaning.
How so?
Because I've never been violent to anybody. Rape is a violent crime. So it is a very serious. Somebody jumps out of bushes and rapes somebody, it's different, I think. So it's a different kind of recollection. I mean, so I don't think anybody's saying I'm violent. Of course, I've been insensitive, but certainly I've never been forceful.
The access to these women, the ability to control them was a standard set among these men. BET Uncut transmuted their bodies into genuine currency for greater access and trained a generation of young people to see that as normal. And even now, as much as I enjoy my fair share of ratchet, female-oriented gangster rap, I'm a Glorilla fan, I'm a Meg Thee Stallion fan, etc., even as they are taking back a level of agency on their sexuality and bodies as a part of the hip-hop art form, it's still participating and reinforcing the same culture. We see women sexualizing themselves and inviting the male gaze on their terms. And yes, some of the same men that promoted this behavior 20 years ago are acting like they don't like it now because they're centered in the dynamic, which is weird in and of itself. But it doesn't mean that the consequences, those unintended consequences of those displays, are any less hazardous for women, or I should say younger girls, who aren't famous rappers, who are participating in the culture, to not be exposed to harm, to not end up getting exploited by those with more power than them. Because that's what this issue is about, power and exploitation. Who has the power and who doesn't? Who does the exploitation and who's getting exploited? And this brings us back to Diddy. Diddy's behavior is monstrous, but it's important to understand that he is a monster of our creation, of the creation of that culture that we all enjoyed for a good 15 years before he started to finally die down. And at that point, he was already off and running with the most heinous of behavior. And what's, I don't want to say funny, but interesting in all of this is that Diddy wasn't like a specific mastermind of the video vixen concept. In fact, I don't have a strong recollection of Diddy doing any really exploitative stuff with women on screen in his videos, etc. He talked a good game in his music, of course, but his imagery was almost meant to be seen as too classy and upscale for the type of booty shaking that you'd see on BET Uncut. It goes to show how appearances can be deceiving. Because Puffy wanted to present as acceptable and viable among this white audience, he didn't do the pouring champagne on strippers move too much in public. He was a high-end upscale party guy. He wasn't the freak off guy, at least publicly.
Exploiters typically tend to show what they want to certain people. So most people who might be on a list, most people in the industry can say they went to a Diddy party. But I'm pretty sure a large amount of those people said, I never saw any of that. And yes, I was at the party. Certain people, just like when they people who went to, yes, I flew to Epstein's Island. They may not have ever seen what goes on behind certain closed doors. So what happens is exploiters tend to create that narrative so that one person can staunchly say, that is not what happened. And they say it because it is true for them, but it does not erase what this other person's truth was. Right. And that's how exploiters create division. That's how they create this gray area of how do we believe which person? And this person has to be a liar because this person said it was true.
But that's the whole thing. His public-facing image and his behind-the-scenes image were very, very different, which is, I guess, somewhat scary because not only was Diddy like being misogynistic and abusive towards women behind the scenes, he was doing that to anybody he had power over.
I like it. Yeah. Yo, Black Love, Spanish home. Let's go. Yeah. Hey, yo.
Despite everything I talked about in the last chapter, there's still this sense of shock about Puffy's behavior being exposed. But why? How can we even think to use the word expose here? Because that word makes you think that this is a surprising reveal, that this stuff was being hidden, but it wasn't. It hasn't. So much of the things that anybody's going to talk about with Puff are public knowledge, not just public knowledge like you had to do some Googles and research, like literal touchstone moments in hip hop history. We know about the public fights. I alluded to the conspiracy theories around Biggie's death and Tupac's death, but what's often glossed over to me that's more indicative of who this man is what happened to Puff's biggest act after Biggie, from that same era when Puff presented Mace as his next biggest thing. After Big died, Diddy shifted all of his efforts and attention to Mace, who didn't have quite the gangster veneer of Biggie, though it's eventually revealed that the decision to make Mace more of a ladies' man was a Puffy creation. Because Mace has such a cool, kind of like smooth veneer, Puff realized that it would be much easier to fit him into his framework as, you know, the pretty boy Mace and Betha versus Murder Mace, who he was before Puff signed.
Started rapping about 3 years ago, and I basically went to Atlanta to meet somebody else, but I ran into Puff and he gave me a shot, and I just try to make the best of my opportunity.
So Mace was like a mix between Drake and DaBaby, maybe? That's the best. That may not make any sense. That's definitely gonna date me, because like, when has DaBaby been relevant in the last several years? But that's, I apologize, old head moment, but you get my point. And all this came together in Mace's first album, Harlem World, where we saw that Mace, though not the typical boom bap, extra hardcore lyricist, was still pretty solid on the mic. He had an amazing flow. Puff's production worked perfectly with it. We also get some of the first beats from the Neptunes. That song, Looking at Me, one of the biggest bangers of the era that's low-key kind of slept on. But not really low-key, because the album sold 200,000 in its first week, which was big even back then, and over several years, it was certified platinum. So Mace, much like Biggie, was often running with a lot of success.
Yes, Mace. His CD, it went #1, debuted at #1.
Yes. I mean that's like astonishing. The only other person to do that is like myself and Snoop Dogg.
But 2 years later, as Mace released his second album that no one remembers, already things are taking on some weird and drastic changes. Mace announced that he was leaving the music industry to become a preacher.
But Mace was huge. Harlem World was huge.
Multi-platinum.
Huge album with huge songs that still hold up to this day.
The first Neptune's hip-hop track, I believe.
Yes.
And I'll never forget when I first heard, what was that? Why you over there looking at me?
Right. Mace was so big.
Yeah.
That album was so big. And within one album, he said, I gotta get out. I gotta need Jesus and to get as far away from that man as possible. And that really stood out to me. To me, that is when, and the people I was around too, truthfully, that's when we started talking about, well, how evil is Diddy really?
Mace gave a lot of reasons for leaving before and after, and in the preceding years would return to the rap game and leave multiple times. However, in recent years, especially after starting his successful podcast with longtime friend and fellow rapper Cameron, Mace has been very explicit about his issues with Puff and very clear about him being a snake and making more than a few allusions to the crimes and abuses towards women and men that have followed Diddy for years.
Since Cain killed Abel, I'm able to kill Cain. And love don't steal, my nigga, change your name. And I see no integrity in your name. And I'm haunted by the ghost of St. James. Champagne King, match my rolling plate chain. And I say, blame God I ain't changed. And if niggas never found a killer, why is niggas living it? Everybody broke, niggas gotta plan a vision in. Niggas be selling their soul to go to a brunch. Niggas might end up sweet, drinking that punch. I suffer good. And niggas know I'm from another hood. To get a brotherhood, I'm trying to make sure that my mother good.
What's up, man? How you doing?
Killer, I'm doing good, man. Reparations is getting closer and closer.
At the time, this seemed like just a dramatic blow up, but it wouldn't be the only one. It would become a first in a series of artists signed to Puff that left him under the worst circumstances. For really most of Diddy's career, it seemed like every artist to make a splash that was closely connected to him eventually fell out with the label on the worst terms. Big died. Craig Mack, Puffy's first major breakthrough artist, fell into a cult and eventually died himself. Mace retired. The Lox escaped and never messed with Diddy afterward. Black Rob left and died sick and in poverty. Loon left over money and also retired and converted to Islam. G-Dep was dropped after flopping, had an addiction to PCP, and then in an effort to get right with God, confessed to a 15-year-old murder which put him in jail for over a decade. 112, Diddy's most successful R&B group, left after their run, but not without lawsuits over royalties, and almost everyone from Diddy's run of reality TV show artists has sued him, with several suing him right now for abuse. And those are just the things that I remember vividly that, like, we knew. There's probably way more behind the scenes that we don't know.
Things are starting to sound more believable.
Right.
You know, and then you start looking at all the other people around him who just end up going to jail. Like, you know, Loon went to jail, Shine went to jail, G-Dep went to jail. Like, everybody around him was like dead or in jail.
The Lox left real early.
Yep. And they were loudly talking.
They have the skit, Raping You Records.
Right.
And I listened to that today for the first time in forever. I'm like, yo.
Right.
And he says, if you can't be my artist, I can't rape you. I gotta rape you. And he's talking about, like, it's not getting into the Diddler stuff, but it's bumping up against it.
It's bumping up heavy.
It's bumping up heavy.
That the people involved in these scenarios, it probably takes them decades to realize that they were victims. That this is so well positioned by a multitude of people as an opportunity, as a way to get into an industry, as a, you know, just like, you're special because you get access to this wealth and power. And the interesting thing is people get fixated on Diddy's sexual engagement with men because of homophobia. But like, men are also socialized to just take more beatings and just pass it on to the next person, regardless of their sexuality. Particularly men in the entertainment industry will allow people to abuse them outright because it gives them proximity to wealth, and then they will just abuse the next person.
Yeah, they take it out on the next person. I think about Shine quietly taking that case. for Diddy. This type of exploitative power was so normal that it was expected, because please believe, Diddy is not alone, not just in the possibility of sex crimes, but in the exploitative nature of the entire industry. While in many ways Diddy is uniquely bad, specifically with his sex crimes, understand that he is just a part of a greater culture of exploitation. Almost all the celebrity record executives that we knew and loved during that era moved the exact same way. Jay-Z snaked Benny Siegel out of opportunities, to which Benny Siegel holds a grudge for to this day. Also, the way Jay-Z sold out Rockefeller Records under the nose of Dame Dash, who has really never recovered from this, is one of the dirtiest moves in the history of hip-hop. Baby of Cash Money Records fame is notorious for snaking people out of money. He and Lil Wayne aren't cool to this day because of unpaid funds, and Baby not paying Pharrell for the beat and what happened to that boy is low-key the butterfly effect of how we eventually get to the Drake versus Kendrick Lamar beef from earlier this year. Speaking of Pharrell, although he's quite beloved in the culture and is presented as one of the industry's good guys, when it comes to this exploitative practice, he's no different. Remember that whole beef between Beyonce and Khalees a couple of years ago when Beyonce dropped Renaissance and had a song sampling Khalees' voice on the album and tried to give her a feature credit, and Khalees got angry about it because she knew she wasn't getting paid from that feature, and she knew Beyonce knew this. Now, the way that eventually played out was wrong, because Khalees started beefing with Beyonce when Khalees' real beef is with Pharrell, because Pharrell owns Khalees' publishing for most of her music up until a certain point, and right after that point is when Khalees quit doing music. And Khalees on numerous occasions fought and tried to sue Pharrell to get control of that publishing, which is all the money made off of her music, and he has refused up until this day, which is why Beyonce paid him instead of Khalees for her own voice. That issue of publishing and ownership is the hyper-capitalistic aspect of the music industry that has been around to this day. That's one of the reasons why it was low-key made a big deal of when Diddy gave people back their publishing a couple of years before all of this started to happen, probably because he knew that all of this was about to start happening. But the point here is to recognize that the exploitation of the women in this case is just a different category of the exploitation of everybody involved. Because exploitation is a core feature of this industry, artists create amazing art and the industry seeks ways to exploit that art to the fullest. And it'd be one thing if they just took a portion of the artist's earnings as a repayment for investing in them, or they paid a fee over the course of being on the label or something along those lines. But these record labels, going back to all those names I listed early on with Rakim, they don't just get money from their investment, they own the rights to the artist's music and publishing, meaning that those great songs that you love, your favorite artist, when you stream that, when you play it on a CD or a record, even if you're just going to a concert, even if you're going to a party and hearing a DJ play the music live, that money isn't going to those artists if those artists don't own their publishing rights. If they don't own that, they don't get money from it. And this is something that Black artists have dealt with throughout American music history, going back to artists like Ma Rainey and Chuck Berry. Historically, Black artists have always gotten the least out of their talent because the industry has always used the ignorance of those artists to the business of the industry against them. And particularly in hip hop, it's also used the desperation of the poverty, that same poverty that made hip hop possible in a lot of cases, was used against those artists who were wanting to be rap stars, wanting to sign a deal so they could get some money so they could eat and get out the streets. And because people like Puff and Jay, and of course the bigger people above them at Sony, Universal, and Warner, these executives know that if they go find someone who is thirsty, like a Benny Siegel or a Saigon or a Jaquan or Chingy or Gorilla Zoe or so many other folks that we don't think about but have made relevant, significant splashes in hip hop during that time period up till now, if those people are in the struggle and looking to eat, just like those same Black women earlier, when they're in the struggle, looking to eat with nothing to lose, you can give them a little piece of anything and then have complete control over them in perpetuity. And that's the rappers. That's the people with a voice. Those are the people with followers. So imagine, or maybe don't imagine, what was happening behind the scenes, what is possible for the seemingly hundreds and in reality thousands of women and girls, and sometimes boys and men, caught up in the underbelly of this vicious industry. I want to end with a brief discussion of something that might come off a bit hokey, like a conspiracy theory, but it actually ends up leading me to a different point, something that Justin Hunt brought to my attention at the end of our conversation.
First of all, corporate America is made and built for white men. So when you're going into corporate America, usually your entryway is to help them with their diversity problem. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to open up doors. Sometimes you got to take that opportunity and get in. And so that's what I did with Ciroc. But I told him I don't work for nobody. Everything in my portfolio I own. So you guys have to know my ultimate dream is a tequila.
The other side of it too is, you know, there's real conversations around the Diageo situation, putting a different type of light on him.
Ever the chaser of the bag, the chaser of money, power, and respect, ever the party guy and promoter, ever the black capitalist, Puff did what many black capitalists have done before him. Something I talked about way back in my Black Conservatives video. He parlayed his access to us, his popularity amongst us, into big bucks for him, being the moneyed white power structures that he gained access to through his relationship with us. In 2007, he went into a partnership with Diageo, a multinational alcohol company that's worth nearly $80 billion and basically runs the alcohol industry. If you're drinking at a club, you're drinking something that they made. He will help them promote their struggling Ciroc label and get 50% of the proceeds. And of course, soon after this deal is done, you constantly see Diddy with Ciroc talking about Ciroc in Ciroc commercials. He is inseparable from the liquor, and Ciroc becomes a staple of hip-hop high life aesthetics. And surely this makes Diddy a lot of money. However, this deal was a lot like the deals that Diddy signed his artists to. He did all the important work. Ciroc was nothing before him, but Diageo still owned Ciroc at the end of the day and made most of those proceeds. Diddy was just talent to them. And this didn't sit right with Diddy for obvious reasons, considering that he knows how talent is treated in the entertainment business.
But people's liquor tastes change, right? So tequila became the hot thing. So Diddy goes and buys De Leon. I know you've seen Diddy push De Leon in recent years. Yeah. So he's pushing De Leon tequila, and he owned half of it, and Diageo owned the other half, right? And so Diageo is in charge of distribution and manufacturing of the business. And they were really upset that Diddy was so successful with Ciroc. They went from selling 40,000 cases of Ciroc a year to 2.2 million a year, right? So, wow.
So being the black capitalist, Diddy buys his own liquor company, De Leon, and then gets into another partnership with Diageo to do the same thing for De Leon as Ciroc. He would use, again, his access to us, his popularity due to us to build up his own liquor company that he owned, and they would just use Diageo to produce it and give them a cut of his business. And this would be a sure shot because he had started a whole wave of celebrity endorsed liquor. His presence opened that door, and like years after, you see George Clooney's Casamigos garnering $1 billion on its sales. There's no reason Puffy couldn't have got it more, but he noticed things didn't quite go the same as they did with Ciroc. Diddy wasn't seeing the same results or enthusiasm behind him promoting a liquor that he personally owned coming from Diageo. And after some investigation, Diddy decides that he needs to go ahead and make something happen. So he sues them for racial discrimination and failure to own up to their end of the business deal they signed with. Surely you see the irony here. Diddy was subtly on the opposite end of the type of business practices that he had participated in for decades. He was fine exploiting other black people on behalf of white businesses. But when Diddy seemingly got too big for his britches, the same white power structure did exactly to him what he was doing to niggas on his label. What we have firsthand is the limit of how far one could actually go playing the dirty game of being a black capitalist. But Diddy did not stop there, because this lawsuit became his thing for the last few years. He went on a black excellence, black wealth crusade. To his credit, doing what everybody says getting you an LLC is supposed to do. Diddy was pushing the envelope and trying to go beyond the natural limitations of black capitalism, always being under white capitalism, y'all. I did a whole video about this. Go watch that video. Anyway, he was trying to own something massive to put him on the same level as the corporations that had always had the real power over him. He attempted to buy BET from Paramount. He tried a black cannabis business. He started the Revolt Network and a few other ventures. And anytime a mic got close to his face, he would speak to black people not selling their wealth, not giving up their resources to white businesses, and saying that black people need to come together and build this wealth so that they could all get free.
We got to start with us stepping up and really taking the responsibility and accountability to be a part of this political movement. People don't really know me. Like, I'm blessed that I have the money to start this political party. I'm not gonna make no apologies for how much cake I get.
You know, that has empowered me. But I know once I get it, I'm going to fund the revolution. I'm a black nationalist. I'm unapologetically black. I have to take care of the tribe first.
Which is not just false, but highly ironic coming from this man. And I wasn't the only one to recognize that, as these words were immediately targeted by his former victims in the hip hop world, of which he owned their resources and wealth and had built his wealth off of their labor. People like Mace scoffed at his hypocrisy. How could he sit there talking about black wealth coming together when he's literally stealing it from other black people? I just have to point out, the truth is that's how it's always worked. I don't have time to get into it. Please just check out the Jay-Z section of my Black Conservatives video for more details there.
He files that suit. Diageo tries to settle it in arbitration. They just want to do a closed door, figure out some deal with it, right? And they release a statement saying that Diddy saying that we're racist is damaging to our brand. It's costing us $1 billion in reputational risk. So the judge decides, no, we're going to take this to trial, and it's going to be a public trial. And then the next month, the Cassie thing happens. And then that January after Cassie, he settles whatever with Diageo. It's one thing with the people that he's hanging out with and partying with, but Diageo is owned by BlackRock and Vanguard.
Yeah, and it's one thing I've talked about in a lot of my more political videos. Like, niggas think they ain't niggas until they really try to fuck with the actual ain't niggas.
Until they try to become the bank.
Unfortunately, or really predictably, we'll never know if Diddy was going to be able to make the possible impossible in his crusade to buy into the highest tiers of our capitalist system. It's not long after Diddy filed his suit against Diageo that the accusations from Cassie and other women start coming in. And it's not long after that Diddy settled his lawsuit out of court with this giant billionaire company. Now, I know that sounds scarily close to he was trying to buy NBC. I know. I'm not trying to do that. People said that about Bill Cosby. It was nonsense then, it's nonsense now. Diddy, much like Cosby, had a significant documented history of his violence abuse. I'm not in any way trying to undermine that. We literally have video evidence of this abuse. But I do think it would be cool if that was the case. As I said earlier, Diddy, like many a black capitalist, made his money off us, and he used that to go further and further as a mogul and a businessman to icon status. And all the while, it seemed like everyone was well aware of what he was actually doing in front and behind the scenes. And the harm he was doing was fine as long as he was a powerful man harming people who deserved it, those without power, hungry rappers trying to escape street life, young women looking to be stars, girls just looking for a good time, all people that Diddy did not have to treat as equals or even as humans, all because of who he was, which was attached to us, and we watched it all in silent agreement. But as soon as Puff mistakenly thought that this power rivaled the real juggernauts in the business world that he was emulating, he was quickly shown that no matter how much money he made, no matter the amount of money he spent on mansions or yachts or luxury items or shiny suits, he was still just a nigga from Mount Vernon. So yeah, if this were some type of setup from Diageo, it would low-key be poetic justice. It's a useful reminder to the reality of how this system actually works and why no amount of placating this system, or in the case of Diddy, imitating this system, is ever truly going to work for black people. There's a lot of speculation that Puffy might possibly end up exposing others as he falls down, that many a celebrity or maybe even a politician has participated in the freak-off. And to that I ask, who did Epstein take down? Who did Weinstein take down? And you might say, you know, politicians and billionaires and princes are different than a couple of rappers and R&B artists, and that's true to an extent. But to create that type of ripple effect really is incompatible with how this system is designed to work. The point of this video is to hopefully get you watching to recognize that the goal for the people that benefit the most from this exploitative system that Diddy took advantage of is for us to hyper-focus on him as the only villain in the industry, to look at his downfall as evidence that the system can be fixed and govern itself, that fundamentally all of these systems work and it's just a few bad apples. But history shows us it's not just a few, it's more like a cycle. And this cycle perpetuates itself on its ability to cast off one of its worst actors so that everyone else gets to keep moving unencumbered. We're talking about a culture of violence and exploitation, and Diddy is the results of that. He's the okie doke. He's a bait and switch. This is much bigger than Puff. It's bigger than hip hop. This is, once again, the American way.